Hello, everybody. Thank you all so much for being here today. My name is Marianne. I'm the store manager here at City Bookshop. Thank you so much for coming to join us here or online if you're streaming us on Zoom today. We host many events and book clubs here at the shop. So if this is your first time here or if you've been here before, feel free to check out our website for what's coming up next. I especially wanted to highlight our Social Justice Book Club, which meets every month. And on November 14th, we have an event discussing You Are What You Watch, How Movies and TV Affect Everything by Walt Hickey. Before we start, some very quick housekeeping notes. If you just take a moment to silence your cell phones, we appreciate it for a distraction-free event. If you need a restroom, they are right upstairs past the cash register. More importantly, you can also find copies of Extremely Online available for purchase upstairs at the register. We'll have a discussion followed by a Q&A and signing line today. If you are watching on Zoom, you can use Zoom's Q&A feature to submit a question at any time. And if you are here in person, you can just raise a hand. And now on to the reason we're here. We are honored to host Taylor Lorenz and David Weigel to discuss Extremely Online, the untold story of fame, influence, and power on the internet. David Weigel is a national political correspondent at Semaphore, covering Congress and grassroots political movements. He is the author of The Show That Never Ends, A History of Progressive Rock Music. And Taylor Lorenz is a technology columnist for the Washington Post's business section, covering online culture. Lorenz was named to Fortune's 40 Under 40 list of leaders in media entertainment in 2020. And Adweek has stated that Lorenz contextualizes the internet as we live it, and Town and Country magazine has called her the Bob Woodward of the TikTok generation. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Taylor and David.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for coming.
We couldn't hear the intro, but they said our names and everything. Okay. So to get started, the first thing I was curious about, because we were both online very early. We both then, I think we became writers online after we spent a lot of time online. When did you first realize, okay, this thing that maybe it was immediate, this thing that I am spending some time on my computer is also more important than other careers or other things, that putting things on print or anything like that?
Good question. Well, I was never a print writer.
Yeah.
We were talking about this before we started. I had no idea. Dave started way before me as a blogger. I started as a blogger in 2009.
2001 for me.
That was that's like the part that I talk about in my book. So I always wrote for the internet first and never cared about getting in print or really prioritized that. And I wrote for digital media websites for most of my career that didn't have a print version. So,
but it was always clear that what was happening because the first sentence in the book is it's a story about a revolution.
Yeah,
it's very clear this is more important. It took me a while to get there. Like there's a blog on the side, but really what we want to do is publish longer things, and this is cute, but you can't make money off it. But it was very clear it was disruptive and like winning.
Yeah,
from the beginning.
Well, I always thought that. Yeah, I think for a lot of like millennials or younger, like people maybe our age and younger, like it's always been, the internet's always been sort of like the default thing. Like this is the only thing I cared about because it was always, that's just where I spent most of my time. And as a blogger, that's where I thought the most interesting kind of conversation was happening. And what I started writing about was stuff that I just felt like the mainstream media wasn't taking seriously. So I just,
I'm curious about what some of those were, but you've worked at lots of the Post, before that the Times, before that the Atlantic, Daily Beast, and Mike. Especially the last four, how often when you bring up a story to an editor does the editor say, "Yes, I know, I've heard of that, and I know what that is"?
Well, as we were just talking about before I came here, my editor is, I think, I don't want to age him, but I think he's 70. He's one of the best editors I've ever had. But he absolutely never knows what I'm talking about when I pitch a story usually. But it doesn't really matter, because I will say, like, a really, really good editor, and this is something I used to not appreciate, I think, before I started working at the Post, because I was always like, oh, the boomers, like they don't get it. And then I realized that, like, you know, my editor now, he is just a really good story editor. And so he just has a really good sense of like what makes a good story. So he doesn't really care, you know, he doesn't know about the things that I'm writing about often, but he just knows how to make something interesting to readers, and that's the most important thing. So
I asked about that because I think the book could have started in many different incidents, many different writers who broke out. The pattern of everything in the book is, here's something revolutionary. It is not taken seriously at all by people, and then after it's taken seriously, people try to exploit it.
yes.
But why did you start the book where you did with Julie Allison, New York blogging? Because that's not as lucrative as some of the stuff that comes later, but it gets that same "how dare she do this" reaction that we see throughout the book.
Yeah, the book opens with a story of Socialite Rank, which was this website in the mid 2000s that was really transformative, because it's always been one of my favorite stories. I remember when it happened, but it was like this blog that came out of nowhere and started ranking the socialites in New York City. And I think their reaction to it was just so fascinating, because they suddenly started to like live and die by this blog.
The socialites rank.
The socialite rank, yeah. And they couldn't figure out, like, they were like, how does somebody know what's going on in our parties? It must be someone from, you know, another socialite. And it was not. It was these two random Russian immigrants that were doing it as a joke, basically. And that was because the party photos were being put online for the first time too. So I just thought it ended up being a really good metaphor for what the internet became, which is just this like big ranking machine, basically, where like everyone is hyper aware of their like social status on the internet and cloud, and like everyone's sort of like assigned numbers and metrics. And so and it was an example of a blog basically upending a traditional kind of institution of, you know, socialites. So yeah, and that's why I decided to start with that. And just there were so many interesting stories about women. I got into mommy bloggers right after that. And I thought, like, the mommy bloggers, like, yes, there were these political bloggers and tech bloggers, but the mommy bloggers were the first to kind of build like true like personal brands on the internet and then monetize those personal brands at scale. Whereas I felt like the more political and tech bloggers, like, they had brands, we know who those people are, but they weren't like, it wasn't so personal for them.
How does it change as it gets easier to get online? I mean, you're writing about period even. I mean, Facebook Facebook for everybody off campuses is like more like 2005, 2006. But how does it change as just you don't even need to do that much work to like build a blog and learn HTML, that you just push some buttons and you're there? How does that change things?
Yeah, well, I think, I mean, I talk about the rise of Tumblr in my book, and that's obviously where I got my start too, was Tumblr. And I think it really lowered the barrier to, it was sort of, lowered the barrier to publishing even further, just because you could really set up a blog much more easily than something like Blogspot. And it had early discovery mechanisms, so you could build an audience. I think it was like this bridge platform between sort of the previous blogging world, which was very disparate, and then the social media world. And I think Facebook also served as a bridge, like this bridge platform where it got people online. I talk about the news feed in the book and how the news feed kind of taught everyone to post publicly for an audience. Previously, there wasn't this expectation of an audience when you were sharing necessarily. So that, even though I think Facebook never really played a huge role in sort of influencer content creator culture ultimately, like, or they did through Instagram, but in those early days, like, it was really the news feed that, yeah, affected a lot.
Is because of the walled garden, or why didn't Facebook play the same role until Instagram, which was very good at ripping off like other stuff that works. And
that's like all Instagram does is roll out copycats.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I talk about in this book this like model of like friends versus fame and kind of MySpace versus Facebook. And MySpace, it's so fascinating to go back and read. Julia Angwin's book about MySpace is such a good read. It actually came out in 2009, and I think it's been a little bit forgotten, but it's like, just the story of MySpace is so interesting, and how similar actually the way that they market it is to TikTok today. Like, because they really understood the value of like letting people, like musicians and creative people, and like, I mean, I think it's also interesting the role that MySpace played in the music industry and how they used music to grow. And so same with TikTok. But they were just way too early, and like average people had not manifested their social lives online yet. And so I think Facebook needed to like come in and get people online. But then it ended up hindering itself, because people didn't just want to connect with people that they knew. Obviously, we want to discover new people.
It felt, and if I'm like reading the book wrong, tell me, it felt like a lot of the big permeating the veil of pop culture moments are commercials, and are people because I'm reading in the book about Chocolate Rain and recalling that he does not monetize, is not able to monetize what he's doing as well as people who come literally months later. So how do people start not both getting wealthy and changing the culture? What is it? Am I wrong that it's kind of you need advertisers to say, hey, we can make money off this, we can sell a burger off this?
Yeah, it's like I think that there started to be this emergent culture online of the meme videos and like the early YouTube videos. I talk about Chocolate Rain, but there was no money in the space. And I think because of the way our society is, like, you need money to like legitimize something so often. And I think it wasn't until the money started to come in really throughout the 2010s that people started to like recognize this as an industry. Even I find myself doing this when I try to defend my beat. I'm like, this is a $500 billion industry. It's like, we should take it seriously. There's so much money involved. But of course, even if there wasn't money involved, we should take it seriously because it's culturally important. But I think the money validates a lot of sort of the importance. And I will give credit to YouTube because YouTube did recognize that very early. They launched their partner program in 2007, and they have always kind of had a revenue split system with content creators, whereas a lot of other platforms have not.
Yeah, could you explain the partner program a little bit, because that is I know what it is now, but it starts with just as the experiment. It feels like for people you talk to, not obvious to everyone, even in YouTube, like how this is going to work.
No, it was like this product manager that was working with a couple engineers. So I mean, they realized that they wanted to monetize the videos, and they very early thought like, well, we'll figure out this way to kind of split the revenue with creators. There was a little bit of a precedent for that, of course, with the advertising. Like, people understood the role of like a pre-roll ad or a mid-roll ad, and it was somewhat long form enough content that you could actually run ads before and during. It's not like, a TikTok where you can't really do that. And yeah, it started as the small team within YouTube and then grew. It wasn't really until 2011 when YouTube acquired Next New Networks, which was this early multi-channel network, that they started to really build out that program. And Next New Networks is the one that coined the word creator to mean sort of content creator and its like modern usage.
When do I mean, Julie Ellison is famous, and like Tay Zonde is famous in a way, but when do creators start taking the role that a celebrity still exists, but become as famous as somebody who is in a hit TV show or was a movie star, released an album? When does that start? How does that start, that they become as famous as anybody else, that they're paparazzi looking for these people?
Yeah. I mean, I think throughout the late 2010s, you started to see it, but I really don't think it was until COVID that I think everyone was so pushed online in those early days that suddenly like digital talent and that line between digital talent and traditional talent really started to blur. And you saw this even within the major, talent agencies too. Like, suddenly, like, there was sort of like these digital teams and traditional teams, and now it's just a lot more fluid with the talent. Like, they'll just get somebody in and then they'll start them working with lots of different teams, and they're not sort of siloed as much. And I think that also sort of coincides with the rise of Gen Z, because I think to younger people, those distinctions aren't as specific. And especially in the music industry, which the music industry is like always, pushing culture ahead. But you started to see these like true internet driven people like Lil Nas X or whatever, who became kind of the real first like star to rise out of TikTok, and other people where it's like these big talents emerging from platforms that end up going into mainstream and doing, maybe they act or produce some music or something like that.
Or you have a hit song because it was popular on TikTok. I mean,
yeah.
Who blows it? There are a lot of people in the book who kind of blow it. I always come back to Vine because I miss Vine so much, and I'm not sure if the space for TikTok would have been there if Vine had been handled properly. But there are a lot of people who kind of blow it in the book. What are like some pivot points where, like, had they just seen what they had, they could have not even controlled the internet, hard to control, but they could have shaped the internet, and they didn't get it.
Yeah, Vine is very much like the main one where it's just like, I wanted to shake everyone involved and be like, stop doing that. Oh my God, you could have had something. But and I originally thought of writing just a book about Vine. I wrote 60,000 words on Vine, which is more than enough for a book. And then my editor was like, no, but no one wants that much detail on this company. But yeah, they really sort of, it it was a combination of Twitter mismanaging, Twitter acquired it pre-launch and I think mismanaged it. And then also they had such a hostile relationship to their biggest talent on the platform. And they were so vulnerable because of the structure of the app and that it was not an algorithmic feed. So it was just very easy for the top creators to manipulate the app. So they blew it. I think Facebook video did blow it. Like Facebook continues to just blow it constantly. Like, oh my God. I don't know if we're still on Threads, but that was like another, it's like they have hype and then they always manage to squander it. But after Vine, before all these big names went to YouTube, they were on Facebook video, which is crazy and so hard to remember because it's like we almost forgot that like year. I mean, you and I worked in media during that time too. Like there was this like boom in video content creation.
The pivot to video.
The pivot to video.
Oh, yeah. Those are traumatic words. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because I think like the same way that Facebook screwed over a lot of media companies by not allowing monetization on video and sort of inflating views, they did a lot of that same thing to the content creators. And so they had Logan Paul, they just had all the biggest names on the internet doing Facebook video and then managed to basically not support them. And they all went to YouTube and now they're still massively popular.
Another thing that comes up from the creators themselves is burnout, which one way it doesn't surprise me because of what they have to produce. On there, it does because if you see a poll of people coming out of high school right now, they think there's a lot of confidence that this would be a great career for them, becoming an influencer, making content, being funny, putting out videos. But it also feels like burnout. People, there's early in the book, there's people who can't monetize it. Later in the book, there's people who can, and then they burn out. Like why does the burnout happen? When does that start happening?
Yeah, a burnout starts happening pretty early, especially, I mean, really in the mid 2010s, because that's when it started to become like this industry where you had to publish very frequently and the daily vlog era of YouTube started. So there was this constant pressure to post. Now it's like deafening. Like you have to put out so much content every day to compete. That's why Mr. Beast has like hundreds of people working for him, just to produce enough. But yeah, I would say it's like with the kids stuff. I did this story recently. It's not out yet, but it's about, I went to this summer camp for YouTubers. There's all these camps across America that teach kids to be, they're summer camps where kids learn to be YouTubers. And it's a big business and there's thousands of them anyway. And so I was talking to the kids and they had such wild reasons. Like, I think that there's just a deep distrust in our economic system. And I think people realize that you can't get a job for 30 years. And they've been sold this lie by tech companies that's very sort of like wrapped up in sort of this American dream of like, anyone can make it. You just have to go on the internet and you can be an entrepreneur, you can be your own boss. And they're fed these like hustle narratives. But when I was asking the kids, like, well, why do you actually want it? A lot was not about fame. It was like, one kid was like, I want to buy my family a house because we couldn't afford it because family like rents and he wanted to buy it. And another kid said his mom was sick. And so he was like, if my followers could help her and get money for her. And I was just like, it was really dystopian kind of their reasoning. And I just thought like, I think that stat gets framed as like, oh, kids today, they just want to be famous. And I think actually a lot of them just sort of want stability. And they've been told that this job is more stable, which maybe in some ways it is. And
I think we can get to questions pretty soon, but what role does the traditional media still play? Because another theme that comes up a few times in parts of the book that you reported first is somebody is not getting credit for something or something is completely misunderstood. And then you show up, like literally you show up, or the New York Times shows up and they do seem to react to something outside the internet, New York Times online. But I mean, I've seen Vines, videos of people holding up the print paper that proves that they actually invented a dance or proves that they are doing what they're doing. Like, what role does media actually, like, what is the relevance and what role does it play now? With everything going on.
I think there's like a couple prestige national brands that that are still kind of relevant in the sense that you say like they offer legitimacy, but they're not relevant in terms of like people reading them. It's more of like a seal of approval. I was talking to some content creators recently and they're like, well, if you want to get like, if they want the CMO of Target to pay attention to them, they can't just say they have millions of followers. Everyone has that.
Still, they don't go if that means they still
it's not, and they don't understand who is what. But I think I think like being like, oh, but look, I'm also in the New York Times. Or another mark of sort of validation is brand deals. So it's like Gucci has worked with me, or I'm the face of, XYZ aspirational brand. So like, I think that's what the media and sort of like these older legacy like fashion brands also can offer. It's this like that air, but ultimately they're not consuming that media really. They're not promoting it. It's more just like, oh, look, these old people validated me. So,
But there doesn't seem to be that much worry about selling out, because other kind of cultural revolutions. I mean, if you go like 60s and 70s, people are saying we can replace everything. We can have our underground press. We can have our own music label. We don't need to this. But it does feel like a lot of legitimacy comes from, and I saw this with bands getting in the iPad commercials.
Yeah.
Like, is there much worry about selling out, or is the goal for a lot of people? I'm talking about millions of people. It's already universalized.
Yeah.
But is there much worry about like selling out, or is it part of the making it that other brands take you seriously?
I think it's the goal.
Yeah.
It's the goal. And I think that's because it's such a hyper capitalistic kind of like system that we're in. And I talk about fake SpawnCon a lot in the book too, which is this phenomenon that happened after the FTC made the rule that everyone has to disclose sponsored content. Like a lot of people actually started to see it as this thing that they wanted, and so people started faking brand deals with a lot of which was like
though they realize like you can't just hold up the bottle of like the booze you're selling. It has to be like empty. Like, we drank it, it's so good that at the party we
no, it was more like people. I talk about this Christian Dior ad campaign, but like people buying the bag and then unboxing it as if they were gifted it, because that shows a level of status. And I've actually found the same thing with my book. There were people that were saying, thank you for the gifted galley. And I was like, what? And then they had bought it actually for themselves, or they said, they didn't say galley. They said, thank you. I screenshot it. I thought it was so funny. And I was like, wait a minute, you bought that. It had the sticker on it. but it's just, but that's totally fine.
But to tell the story online, you need to have video of you opening the box.
About you. And I did send the book to a lot of big influencers that did end up posting about it. And I think like sometimes people see that and then they like, yeah, it's aspirational. I think we have to get to questions.
I think we do. Yeah, no. Is there a mic in the back, or is the?
Okay, we're gonna ask a couple questions. Otherwise, you can just shout and I can repeat it.
Oh, that's right.
In the black, yeah.
One of the things that I've been thinking about is the role a lot of legacy brands have been using in sort of pulling influencers into roles that were typically professional. So thinking about like red carpet correspondence and things like that, like there was really a phase where that was a thing. And as somebody watching it, it seems to kind of degrade the quality of like the journalism and things like that. And not like a constant watcher, but it seems like some of the brands are shifted away from that. So I'm wondering if there's some kind of like if some of the brands are kind of catching on to the fact that influence is not enough. Professional standards are sometimes kind of nice to have in that experience. I'm wondering if that experience is kind of like.
Yeah. So just for people who couldn't hear, she was asking about kind of this, that maybe like a lot of brands have realized that they can't just replace everyone with influencers, especially red carpet. It's so funny you mentioned this. I was talking to a friend of mine who is a red carpet correspondent, because it has been completely replaced. Like every single red carpet is just a bunch of TikTokers now asking questions, like man on the street style. And it's not, I do think it's not great. It's not working. I think a lot.
It is a skill. Interviewing is a skill.
Interviewing is a skill.
We would think so, but it is.
Yeah. No, and I have noticed. I mean, I was at Cannes this year, earlier in March, writing about actually what TikTok was doing there, and it was interesting because they had the real press asking the questions on that little red carpet instead of just the TikTokers, and I think that's because they wanted the more newsworthy quotes to get the press attention, because TikTokers are great at getting sort of audience, like their audience engaged, but they're not going to ask that question that then becomes a headline and gets your event written about. And so I think now it's more of a mix or a hybrid, or you have the correspondent with the content creator doing the funny social videos.
Wow.
Oh, I'll go to you and then
I'm just curious. So you have Lil Nas X, which comes out of TikTok and it's famous. How are people that are famous that are trying to now harness social media, Jennifer Garner, people like that, how are they faring in this environment?
Yeah, such a good question. He asked, how are the traditional celebrities faring in this environment? People like Jennifer Garner and stuff. Well, they're all trying to get on TikTok now, and got varying levels of success. I was talking to a celebrity recently for a story, and I was asking them about this. And actually, they were asking me if I knew anybody that they could hire to do it, because they were like, trying to get on there. I think they
do what part of it to do
to make content for them on TikTok. They
Oh.
can't understand how to, because I think, I understand if you're a talent, you have a team to do everything.
Yeah.
Jason Derulo was he had a 25-person content team at one point. He was kind of like one of the first celebrities, and I think set the bar pretty high. Most celebrities now recognize that they have to be on there to reach younger people. But I think it's interesting what celebrities haven't been on there. There's a really good video by this girl, Coco Moco, who's like one of my favorite analysis person. Like she's a TikTok analysis. Anyway, she was just saying like, it's notable that like Beyonce is never on there. Like there's these certain artists that are so exclusive, and I think being on social media would devalue their brand. But for any kind of like working actor, like working celebrity, like they do want to stay culturally relevant, and that's where cultural relevance is made.
Because they could be cringe if they're bad at it.
Yeah.
I listen to Who Weekly.
The worst sin. Oh yeah.
like Brie Larson's inability to post normal things on Instagram, I think has hurt her. Yeah.
It's so true. Also, Who Weekly is such a good podcast. If you're interested in like niche influencer world, listen to Who Weekly. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I did a sharply worded tweet earlier this week about legacy media.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I'm at the age where when bloggers first started happening, they were looked down upon by the print people because the idea was like, it's just the internet, it's ephemeral, it can be erased, it can be changed at a moment's whim, and no one will ever give it the credibility that print has. And now 20 years later, that's not the case. Except now we have things like Twitter today, where like no one can get any decent information on what's happening right now in the Middle East. And I'm wondering if we're seeing some of those fears about sort of manipulation of information coming to pass, and how do you deal with sort of like not having a stance of just simply plain epistemological agnosticism in light of this?
Yeah, such a good question. He's just asking sort of this tension between like legacy media and traditional, and how it's this hard, difficult information ecosystem now. I felt the same way. I was trying to read on the way over here. I literally searched the word Israel on Google because I was like, I can't.
On Twitter, Elon's Twitter searching for Israel is not going to come up with great stuff.
Like there was like misinformation, and I was like, is this video even real? Like it's become so unreliable. I mean, I think obviously I have a lot of problems with the traditional media. I think I don't know how many people share it, but it's very frustrating. And I think, but I work in traditional media because I do believe that there's such importance to reporting. And unfortunately, most of what happens online on social media, even from the best content creators, is not reported. It's commentary content. And so I really just wish that the traditional media would recognize their like diminishing influence and actually sort of get with the times. That's my frustration with it, is I think they like there's this like level of arrogance within the traditional media from these institutions where they think that they're going to be around forever and they're always going to be definitive. And I think we see constantly over the past 5 years, especially, like these brands fall by the wayside, right? Or like struggle. And obviously I think like the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, or Washington Post, wherever I work, is, like those brands are like around, but there's just constantly these other sort of like, I mean, I think of places like the Baltimore Sun, which are like these places that were doing incredible reporting that I think their business model can't be supported by the internet, and they never really adapted. And that's what frustrates me, because I think if we look at this world and take it seriously, we should prepare for it, if that makes sense. I don't even know if that answered your question, but sort of.
But how could they currently right now, if your news organization has somebody on the ground covering a story, how do you cut through like the millions of people who are just pointing at headlines and like commenting on their YouTube channel who don't know anything? How do you cut through?
Well, I think that they could develop closer relationships with those people and not just treat them as sort of inferior. I think a lot of people that are doing that type of content actually are pro journalism and they want to present accurate information, but they don't. They're sort of negated a lot by the media. I don't know. Wait, hold on. You had a question?
So content creators have created all this content that is about to fit into, or maybe already has been fit into AI models. What happens then?
Such a good question. He said content has been fed into AI models. What happens then? I was actually thinking about this recently because there was that great, I think it was the Atlantic story on all the books that have been fed in. And I mean, it's interesting because the content creators that I've interviewed are so pro AI, like
Really?
in a delusional way. Yeah, it's just
Why?
like, I don't know.
Why
It's just,
aren't they?
I have not
If you
been
talk
able
to them, what's their
I
explanation?
think because anything that sort of lowers the bar to content creation that they are happy with because it makes their jobs a lot easier. And so they're like, oh my God, it's gonna be great. And I could just generate, thousands of AI illustrated thumbnails now for my videos and stuff. And it's like they're not, it's kind of it makes me sad a little bit, but I do think that there's going to be a lot of discussion around IP and sort of that's going to become a bigger point of contention and problem. Yeah. Okay, I'll get some from the back. I'll start with you. And yeah, he asked about the sort of far right content creators that a lot of them start with like a generic topic, like I guess psychology with Jordan Peterson, and then make this far right turn. I mean, it's money. It's 100% money. I think it's so easy to make money on the right as a content creator. Like, it's shocking. There's an entire infrastructure. The right wing media is built to sort of boost like content. Like once it's just this whole like mechanism on the right, and the right wing media is so intertwined with the content creator world that I think it's just very lucrative and you can get a huge audience. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts because you know that world better.
I think it's what you're saying is 100% true. I was going to ask why the left does not have the same ability to break through. You can select different people who have, but I think it's now 10 years on the left of people wondering why no one has broken through the way Ben Shapiro has, why their cousin sees a million like Daily Wire videos before they see anything from like Vaush or Chapo or something. I don't know. I feel like I think a lot of it is male loneliness and people staying online looking for stuff that first tells you how to be more confident and then tells you who the enemy is.
Yeah.
Certainly that's what I get served as somebody who doesn't really think that, but like consumes content all day and covers politics. I see a lot of, I'm interested in this finance topic, and then 3 days later, why the Rothschilds are behind your misery. I wonder how much of it's just is it easy to blame the algorithm? Is it these companies are just kind of pushing right wing? Certainly, Elon's Twitter seems to be.
Well, Elon's Twitter, yes, 100%. But even before that, YouTube, and actually, I will give credit to YouTube again because they have sort of tried to mitigate this recently, and there was a study came out showing that they had actually made huge progress in fixing this, but
for the pushback from the right and saying you're censoring us.
Yeah, exactly, because the right immediately claims censorship and they're very good at weaponizing the media. And I think also there is no like big left-wing media complex in this country. There's sort of like the traditional media, but the right embraced the content creator world. It's since the beginning. And so I think like, and there's whole sort of like the way that they spin stories is so different, but yeah, there's many reasons, and I think the algorithms play a huge role in it for sure.
I definitely don't see the left complain as much the way they do. Not saying we're getting shadow banned. My content about like ending capitalism is getting shadow banned. I do see my content making fun of like a drag queen is being shadow banned.
Yeah,
I feel like complaining does work on the internet.
Being amplified. Yeah, exactly. Okay. Yes. Sure. Yeah, she asked, what's the future of social media and Twitter? Are we losing Twitter to Elon? You know what? I think yes, unfortunately. I wrote a story a couple months ago, and I do think a lot of the core use cases of Twitter for average users has already been sort of taken by TikTok. Like TikTok fulfills a lot of those use cases. Like TikTok is definitely where pop culture news breaks, entertainment news. It's where like these cultural narratives come from that end up in traditional media, like things like girl dinner or like just these like little things that are pieces of culture. I think what is keeping Twitter alive is politics and sports to a lesser extent. I don't think that there's a clear for people that want to follow like real-time sports, Twitter is still this place for them. And I think for politics, I don't think Twitter is going to go anytime before 2024, because I think it's going to be kept alive through this election cycle. But I mean, Elon is really doing his best to make it more and more unusable by the day, like with the link stuff. I feel like I'm like, yeah, it's crazy. I don't.
Then the right loves organizing on it. Like the right really has moved what was on Gab and I mean, that still exists. But this week, if you wanted to hear updates from Matt Gaetz on the speaker thing, you listened to Spaces. He just jumped on Spaces, hosted by like Benny Johnson's producer and stuff. It's like the right is definitely aware that Twitter is very habitable and using a lot more than the left. I don't know what the left is doing exactly.
I don't know
in this reality where the owner wants more right-wing content.
I mean, he's banned like a lot of people too. Like, I mean, he banned my favorite account Juniper recently, which is one of my favorite Twitter accounts. I was so sad about it. Okay, let's in the pink. What's happened? What? Oh, such a good question. She asked, what's happened since I handed in the book that I wish I could have gotten in? I mean, Elon's Twitter is really interesting, and I think it's still being written. I had a piece actually that came out in the Atlantic today where I talked about how like his hostility towards users is very reminiscent of Vine and kind of like some of these other platforms that have like, I mean, I brought up the Reddit example too, like the backlash from a lot of the Reddit communities over the API restrictions. Like there's been a lot of times where this is why I think fundamentally his project is not going to work. You can't be that hot. Like he doesn't understand the value. Like he's almost resentful of his own users. And he's like, when he was talking about making people pay, it's like, you're lucky if people use the app, honestly, at this point. So, yeah, I wish I could have gotten more of that in, but it's still happening. And there's going to be so many books on it that like, I couldn't get that in. I'm trying to think what else. That was the main thing. I ended it in 2022 because it kind of was like I do feel like when COVID happened and everyone became really online, it was sort of like a bookend to this like certain part of the internet. And it's not clear, especially as Twitter goes away, like what this next landscape is going to look like. I'll do, way in the back. And then what do I think? What the Twitter, like, what's the best Twitter like platform to follow journalists? Okay. Very good question. Okay. I'm still on Threads, but I'm very mad at them for blocking searches. And I think fundamentally they'll never fully, because Adam Mosseri ran newsfeed during the 2016 election and like the worst time in Facebook's history, like he's so afraid of news and content and politicized content that I don't think that Threads will ever actually create a real viable alternative to Twitter, but I would actually like them to. I can't believe I'm rooting for them, but Mastodon is just too, I don't think will be mainstream. Blue Sky is interesting. You know, I don't know. I think a lot of where people get their news and information is now increasingly TikTok. Like with the Ukraine war is happening, or like people want a lot more on the ground stuff. They don't care about the real time as much, it seems.
Yeah.
We'll do one more last one in the blue.
Yeah, it seems like the kind of story of like right-wing algorithm feedback loops is like pretty familiar and pretty well known. But then when you look at like where Twitter is going and where a lot of the older versions of that, like kind of one for many mass media are going compared to TikTok, it seems like this kind of feedback loop cybernetic analogy doesn't really go very far in explaining the social fabric. And so I'm wondering if there are any other kind of frameworks that you feel like are just how you're thinking about it. And I'm sorry because I came in a little bit late, so if that was your talk.
No, not at all. That's such a good question. Are you saying sort of like how I'm thinking about like what like sort of why Twitter is the way it is, or?
Yeah, well, I think that the kind of the like right-wing algorithmic replication thing doesn't really account for a lot of political phenomena.
Yeah.
Like you have Twitter, like all of these feedback loops do radicalize a lot of people, and you get a lot of like kind of culty, MAGA, whatever. But that's not the same thing as society.
Right.
So is very difficult, but doesn't really.
100%. And I think there's so much, I mean, I think it's hard also. I mean, people love to say like Twitter is not real life or whatever. I think it's a reflection of a certain part of life, right? It's like a certain that is relevant. That doesn't mean it should be ignored. But I think all of these platforms are kind of a mirror to different parts of society, and sometimes they're more amplified than others. I think Twitter's just become, I mean, Elon is treating it very specifically as a political project, and he has a very specific ideology that he seems to want to push and use his power as the founder to push that. So I don't even think it's like the algorithms as much as it is like Elon himself. Like he has so much power on the platform that it's like he's just resharing all this stuff that is inherently viral because of what he's doing.
Just the worst memes on the planet.
Oh my God, this man! I know he needs his phone taken away, but it's interesting, and I don't know how that, like, I do think it's also like turning a lot of people off to him. Like there's a lot more people that used to sort of, I actually, even when he took over Twitter, I remember talking to a friend who covers Tesla for like NBC, and anyway, we were talking, and I was like, oh, he doesn't seem like, he's kind of, how crazy can he be? Like he has these companies, like it'll be interesting. Like I just didn't really realize how kind of like off the rails he had gone. And I think a lot more people, now that they've been publicly exposed to this part of Elon, are kind of skeptical of him.
Yeah, no, he definitely wants to get rid of journalism generally.
Yeah.
And have, instead of people clicking on a website where journalists are like paid to work and rate a story, to just share some like plagiarized stuff.
Yeah.
But that's why I think you're right on TikTok. Like obviously you're right, but like on TikTok, on TikTok replacing this, like it is more useful information. Like, oh, a video that somebody recorded from the scene is more useful to me than a guy who bought a blue check saying, I just saw this on TV, everybody. I'm not going to link it. But...
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's ultimately a losing game, because I actually don't think Elon understands very much about media at all. Like I had to laugh at a lot of his posts recently, because he's been like, somebody was quote tweeting it like he sounds like he's giving an ONA talk in like 2008, which is like for a journalist, it's like the Online News Association, but he's like, the power of citizen journalism, and it's like, my friend, we did this a long time ago. So yeah.
Is there anyone else? I think there's more hand.
Okay, we're out of time. We'll do one last one. Yes. Yeah, he asked, if Twitter is becoming this sort of like cesspool of disinformation and right-wing sort of extremism, why not go on there and why not go on there as a liberal and debunk it? I mean, I think there's value to that. I agree, but I do think that unfortunately they don't care about the truth. Like they know that it's not true, or they don't care, and you are sort of giving them engagement. And in some ways, not everyone doing that. I hate the notion that like, oh, everyone on Twitter, like you're just, I think you can use Twitter in like a somewhat ethical way, and still use it. And to, like, I mean, I use it to like mostly just promote issues that I care about at this point. But so I totally agree with you that like it's not worth like never engaging, but I do think it's a little fruitless sometimes, because your reply just gets piled on by a bunch of blue checks and it never really changes anyone's mind. But
yeah, I want you to have the last word, except, I mean, thank you to East City Book for hosting this. This is great. And you're signing, where are we going to sign? Where are you signing?
I think they're going to bring a table out so I can sign some books, but I just wanted to say thank you so much to everyone who came. I want to take a picture. Gotta get it for the gram. Thank you so much to everyone. And I hope you'll stick around. I'm going to be signing books and saying hi. So thank you again so much.
Thank you everyone for coming. Before you disperse, we'll be signing right here. We're going to take a moment to reset the space. As you can see, there's not a ton of room for a line right now. If you want to help us out, you can fold up your chair and just put it against the wall. We'll take care of those. And if you want to start a line around where the couch is, we will come back in just a moment.